So thank you very much for joining this session. So this is about something called ArtEO. I have previously given two quite detailed talks about Earth observation at previous MTF, so I'm not going to do that extensively today. What I'm just going to do instead is give a very quick, rapid-fire recap of why Earth observation is important, and then we'll talk a bit about this project. So a little bit of context, and just to be super lazy, I'm going to use PowerPoint actually MTF 3 years ago, because it's more or less the same. Satellite Earth observation. It's something that we feel like we know, and it feels familiar because we all use Google Earth, because we are more connected now with location information than we've ever been before. The truth is that satellite Earth observation is absolutely vast. And the vast majority of that, and I'd say a good 95 to 99% of it, never really ever gets seen, and certainly not by anybody outside of a very, very, very small arena of specialists. And this is even after 10, 12 years or more now of enormous attempts to open up satellite Earth observation data. The Copernicus program, funded by the EU, has been very important in that respect. There are lots of data portals, in theory, open and free. But the truth is it remains problematic for anybody who isn't familiar with terminology or understands the file types to actually access any of this information. Meanwhile, what's being gathered month by month is petabytes of absolutely extraordinary information measuring every parameter of the planet. We are literally taking the vital signs, the pulse of the planet every day. And the growth in satellites in orbit is growing exponentially. So we saw, just going to skip ahead. It'll work like this for now. I'm not going to stay on this presentation for long, but thank you, Matthew. So this image, we saw a version of this yesterday. It's a slightly older version of this. A colleague from from RISE showed us this. So it's just breaking down the different European programs that have satellites in orbit. But the latest picture is, of course, much more dense than that. But this is only one small part of the picture. We, of course, now have a massive growth in private sector Earth observation companies. Planet, you may have heard of, ICEYE, SatView. Each of these are now creating constellations of satellites that are privately owned, privately funded, and collecting various different parameters that fill the gaps which the public missions perhaps don't cover so well, but also creating capabilities that are enabling new business opportunities, new impact from the data. So it's a fast-growing arena, and there's an enormous amount of innovation, and there's an enormous amount of data emerging. So this is just a quick snapshot of data that's available through one of ESA's programs, the Climate Change Initiative. You can see there that some of this goes back, it hasn't actually got a timeline on there, but some of this goes back decades because the satellite industry is, of course, now 40 plus years old. And that's just a few of the parameters that are measured on a daily basis. And of course, there are small sats, there are opportunities for educational satellites now, enormous changes in the way in which data is being made increasingly available. But on top of that, we must remember that there's another side to Earth observation, which is the human perspective. And astronaut photography has always been an important part of Earth observation. It's not just about satellites. If you want to, you can go and find NASA's own archive of astronaut photography, which is a very excellent searchable database. But somebody like Tim Peake, for example, and this book was edited by a former colleague of ours, Max Alexander. He noted that when you look at the Earth from orbit, even when you're just 300 or 400 miles above, there are very, very, very few signs of human existence. You look on a planet that almost feels virgin, feels just a natural body. And that just reminds you that something we often hear about, the overview effect that astronauts often talk about when they go to orbit, is something that we can potentially all partake in if we had access to this imagery, if we had access to this data. So that's a little bit of just some background context. Before we get into our specific project, just to say that as a company, so my main company, Imperative Space, is dealing with this issue all day, every day. So Imperative Space works across lots of different parts of the space sector, but predominantly in Earth observation. And one of our main activities is to make data more available to specific audiences that can act on it. So that might be policymakers, it might be major funders of international development projects, it might be educators, mediators of information, journalists, what have you. So we do that in a whole raft of ways, and there is always an important role for proper science communication that is explaining the underlying science, explaining the underlying implications of what we observe. There's also room for education and proper training. So we have another initiative, which is Imperative MOOCs, which has pulled together several large-scale courses focusing on satellite Earth observation and related environmental data. And all of these are important pieces of the puzzle in transferring knowledge and ensuring the right people understand the data that's available. But there is one missing piece of the puzzle which we're now trying to address with our project ArtEO. And that is that I think we'll all agree that in times of crisis through history, art has played an incredibly important role in not just in a utilitarian sense, not just nudging the dial on public opinion or influencing policy, but also just helping us as a society reflect back on where we are, to understand ourselves better, to just work out who we want to be. And to be able to do that, you need, as artists, I would suggest, access to as much direct information as possible about the state of our world, the state of the planet, the state of the issues that you're trying to address. And satellite Earth observation has the power to give that to artists, but is hard to get to. So going back to ArtEO, this is what we're trying to address. So it's a very, very simple concept. We are essentially just trying to bridge the gap between artists and the data. We want to equip artists with the ability to quickly and intuitively and instinctively find what's relevant to them, that's relevant to their own mode of practice, whatever their genre, whatever their methodology. And we take a very broad definition of art here, from poetry to sculpture, from digital, data-informed art through to music of every kind. And the aim is to give that access, but also to make it possible to equip artists with context and access to expertise if they want it. They're not obliged to. Again, this is not a pure science communication initiative. This is different. This is art-led. This is about allowing art to do what art does through its own organic, natural process. We're just trying to facilitate that and then kind of get out of the way. So we're not asking artists to explain the science, explain what we see in the data necessarily, unless they want it. We're just giving them the opportunity to work with it. So we're doing that in a bunch of ways. Eventually, we're going to be creating some free point of view services, which will be available to any artist anywhere in the world. We're in a development phase at the moment. We're calling it the pioneer phase, where we've been trying to do a proof of concept and working with a selected group of artists who've been doing some phenomenal work to help us work through this process and understand what does and doesn't work well. We're going to show you some of those work in a minute. But you can browse this website. So it's arteo.earth, so arteo.earth, E-A-R-T-H. And you can read about the plans that we have and the interdisciplinary collaborations that we have in already. But to skip ahead now to the art itself. So this is the group we're working with. Many of them you'll recognize, some of you as MTFers. Danielle's sitting here. Tom is also around somewhere, but I think he's up in other issues just now. And again, it'd be interesting for you to just sort of see who overlaps with this network here at MTF. But what we've been able to do the last few months is actually start to enable some artworks to be produced. And we've been starting to do that increasingly at scale. We just had a fantastic showcase at Ars Electronica, the festival last week. And what we're going to do for the rest of this session is just show you a glimpse of some of these artworks, albeit I'm having to slightly improvise because we don't have Tom here, and then open it up to discussion, and then we can just talk about how those works were produced and hear what you think about it. So I'm not going to play you full works because there will be a showcase of some of these artworks on Saturday. We'll have an area of the exhibition hall to show these works as well. So there'll be other opportunities to see them in full. Get us more to... So first of all, just to give you a flavor of what things look like in the 8K deep space room at Ars Electronica. So you can see that we're now starting to be able to put some of these artworks onto large screens and demonstrate the power that emerges when combining existing techniques that some of these artists have with the imagery shown at scale. So this is Danielle's piece here. This is actually 3D, so it looks a little bit off in that image. It's a stereoscopic presentation that we showed. Incredibly immersive piece of work in the middle of Danielle in a moment. And then just to give you a little bit of flavor of some of the work, just going to play just a few short snippets from some of the pieces. So I'm not sure which one this was first. This is actually from Tom, who's in the room. Cover. There we go. Right. So I'll just quickly talk over this briefly, which is to say that the audio here is actually the consequence of another artwork that was created by one of the other pioneer artists, JP. His artwork is in fact an app. It's a sonifier tool that enables you to immediately sonify any Earth observation image, but also to move across it and to create music with the image. Tom took that and then created his own abstract artwork, making selections of Earth observation imagery, and I'd let him talk about it if he joins us later in more detail, but I'll just let that play out for a minute. Pause this a second. Sounds like it's coming from here. From these little speakers. Right, so not coming out here. Oh, okay. Should we pump it up? Yeah, so this is using JP's sonifier, which Tom then used as part of creating his own piece. So all the audio you're hearing relates to the image. In some cases, if it's a sort of single tone, it's because that's an average of that image. In other cases, he's using the cursor to move across the image to generate music based on the image. Anyway, I'm going to pause this piece now, and I'll join us later and talk a bit more about that one. But just to say as well that that piece it's relatively simple in some respects. It is a series of Earth observation images that in themselves are unaltered, but they are, there's a selection process that's happened, an artistic intervention that's been made to choose them, to put them in a sequence, to move across them in a certain way, and that obviously carries its own power. So JP is one of our artists. His Sonifier app is one of his artistic outputs through this project. We're going to show that as a demo at the presentation at the Saturday showcase. So you'll be able to play around with that. We can also give you a link later as well. Just to also mention that this piece also reminds us that Subhigh Earth observation, one of its great powers is that it is measuring the Earth at extraordinary scales at both ends of the spectrum. You have continuous, consistent, uninterrupted measurement and imaging of the Earth, both at scales that are continental but also microscopic. So these colors here are phytoplankton. So this is actually a scientific parameter used in climate science called ocean color. And it is an incredibly important insight into ocean health, but also into issues like pollution, and overlaps with other parameters as well to give extraordinary insights. So these incredible colors are generated by tiny microscopic phytoplankton who amass in extraordinary structures. Something that's become a science more in the satellite era that didn't really exist in the same way before. So, move on to another piece. Okay, so I'm just going to pause this one here. Yeah, so this is a piece by Sock Redding, who's another NTFer. So what you're looking at here are individual satellite Earth observation images that have been morphed and warped to look like an entire planet. So part of the intent here, I think, which Sock was here to talk about, Red was here to talk about themselves, but part of the intent is that they are highlighting the fragility of these individual environments and making the point, in effect, that what if our entire planet was that environment? Would be taken with care? But there's also something here speaking to this feeling quite alien. The scoring is done by Tom, and I think it sort of really accentuates that. So familiar but alien all at once, and I think Francisco may say a few more things about Red's take on this. I just want to quickly switch across to show you something a bit about the process here. Just want to quickly show this one from one of the early workshops for ArtEO in London a few months ago. And so I just want to show you that it really is directly a process of selecting individual satellite observation images and then sort of working through creatively how that can be interpreted into this particular realization that that's good. It's a you got the glimpses of that bit. Right. So another piece. This I'll probably just show a segment somewhere in the middle. Well, let's take it from the beginning and let's take it from there. So the reason there are big chunks of black there, I forgot. That version is actually a version that was created for a performance piece that was shown at Ars Electronica, where that version of the video acted as a backdrop to Ava Petrich, the artist, doing a spoken word element and also physical performance with the work. But what you saw there in terms of those shadow images are her own shadow photography that is then overlaid onto the Earth oscillation imagery, in effect making creating a sense of our traces on the Earth, our impact on the Earth. And a lot of the spoken word element is in effect a sort of poetic apology on behalf of all of us to the Earth for the impact we've had on it. But again, you'll see the full work hopefully later in the week. So just maybe one other, which is just a video recording from Ars Electronica. So again, you can't see this in its full impact because this was a stereoscopic presentation, which obviously you need 3D glasses for, but just to give you a flavor of a piece by Danielle here. Okay, and again, you'll have a chance to see the full work in a new render later this week. So at this point, I'm going to pause my summary, and I'm actually going to ask Danielle, as a neat segue with that, to come up and just say a little bit about that piece and the process he went through. And then I'm going to ask Francisca to also just share some thoughts, and then we can open it up and discuss what you've seen. So thank you, Danielle.
Right. So what you're looking at is basically a particle cloud that is rendering a EO imagery, where basically what I did is we know this concept of pareidolia. Basically, humans, we tend to find patterns with our senses, right? I believe pareidolia is more specified to images. But anyway, what I did is just try to enforce these pareidolias that I was finding on this EO imagery through generative AI. So I basically built this data set and then just render it on this particle cloud. Also, the audio piece that you were hearing is also composed by me, and this particle cloud is audio reacting to it. I think I'm going to leave it like that. I got everything set up, so if you want more information, I'll also check out some prototype that I'm doing. So this particle cloud just becomes like a hologram. That's what I'm trying to do right now. Something that I forgot to add, the main idea is to highlight endangered species that are reference to this particle, this EO data, like the location of the EO data and the endangered species. I'm just trying to find pareidolias with these species and enforce them with generative AI. So that's what's happening. And that's it from my side.
So I'm the artistic advisor and community manager to this Pioneer Phase and to my second family with ArtEO. So my focus this year was basically to facilitate what we call R&D process that is led by artists. Because we have all these technicalities, it's the categories of what we have in a vision, but transforming all these ideas into a mission we all know what we have in mind usually doesn't translate into how we are tackled with challenges once we develop it. So it was very interesting for us to basically just confront a set of created artists. So that was like kind of a very also strategical decision to find artists who have different formats of expressing their visions in different media and very analog approaches, and also have the asset for them to have different backgrounds. So we have some who have a lot of experience in EO, and we have some that just like say, okay, it's the first time I've ever encountered working with this imagery and understanding the vastness, what these data points can be, and just like explore this process with us. So what we try to showcase now is some snippets of what we've been working on in the past 7 months. And the interesting for me is part of me is also when I go for creative production. So we, for example, had the showcase at Ars Electronica, just understanding what do we do with ideas when they all of a sudden are then coined on a specific space. It becomes a different dimension if we know, okay, 16 to 9 meters of wall and floor projection, and all of a sudden the art pieces move into, we want to make them immersive. We want people to really sit in that projection. We want to create a room of resonance and integrate them into this performative character. We also had formats like presenting our work at the EGU, which is the biggest geosciences conference in Europe. And we would be sitting in front of a fully packed room of 80 academics, and most of them have been blasted with like 3 days of conference already, from 9 o'clock to 10 in the evening, all the socials on the side. And we just decided we're going to open our presentation, 8-minute slot, with a breathing meditation, showing one video work, and actually reading out one of the poems that was constructed that goes with Zog Redding's Planets, as we called it back then. And it was this work in progress, like sharing these thoughts that were not descriptions of data. And it was so amazing to feel and hear about also like the feedback of that group in that room, just saying, oh my gosh, just like we literally had people come up to us and just tell us, I'm so grateful that you did this breathing meditation, because your video was the first piece of kind of video content that I actually was able to take in, because minds were cluttered with one set of content after the other, and we were presenting in a art-based session. So all the day that was like kind of scheduled of presentations, it was people talking about art in words. No one really dared too much to let art speak for itself. And I think this is what is also very important in art approach, is like kind of arts first, trying to find these ways of expressing beyond words and really make things felt. And that's what I loved about this big showcase that we had in the Deep Spaces Art at Ars Electronica Festival, having this diversity of things. We have the technical aspect of sonification tools, and really kind of, we're crunching pixels, colors, picking them up, and it's just like, it's sinus waves, that's it. And all of a sudden we have a soundtrack, and then some other artist picks up on it. So it's like kind of this collaborative mode when we kind of go to a place without actually having the definite destination, and just like mapping this. And I think this is the amazing part that allows this to be a joint approach and an exploration. And I think it's also the invitation that we want to extend within the setting of MTF. It's like we have data sets that we would like to share with you, and you can dive into imagery, you can dive into data sets, vegetation data of 20 years. We can see if there's points of interest that are very specific to you, like the example of yesterday and my kind of connection to the floods in Vienna connected to the Danube, but also other countries like Poland. And just like maybe we start with one data set and then we zoom out, we find other points of interest and try to connect them. And I had so generously, for example, Admiral offering, it's just like what I said kind of resonated with her. So she could already hear a piece of music to what I was describing. And then I already had Andrea and Stefano just like jumping on board and just like, how can we get that imagery? We want to work with it. And I think this is kind of the mentality that we also want to share and open up to kind of approach us. We'll drop you with some data sets. We're happy to share what we've been developing so far, but I think it's mostly about like, what are your personal perspectives to what would you do with the data? So that's also kind of our learning and our hope to kind of take away from this and future collaboration.
Separately, Imperative Space has a LLM project in progress with the European Space Agency. We're a partner in a project called LLM for EO, which is using a RAG approach to create a virtual expert. Using existing models. We're not creating a new foundational model. But whether we can leverage that into this project is yet to be seen in terms of timing. What we're doing with this is a slightly alternative way of creating ultra-intuitive search tools. For example, I'll just quickly show you. So to pick on what Francisco was saying, what we do want to do this week, over the next 3 days of prototyping, is we do want to share some of the curated data sets we've already been pulling together for this project. Now, eventually, the idea is to have vast amounts of data that doesn't feel vast, that is easy to navigate and find what you want thematically, by color, by whatever you want. But getting there involves solving a lot of the problems that actually face the wider Earth observation arena and some of the things that we've been hearing about this week. So it's not straightforward, and we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and we're working with technical partners on that. But just as a sort of first step, we've got some curated collections which we will start to make available more publicly over the coming months. And one of them is in your flavor. That later. But the gist of it is that it looks like an image gallery, but you can just there's a bunch of tags at the top. You can hit a theme, and you can see everything that's ocean related or anything that's trees related, or whatever it might be. But you can also do some basic search on, for example, color, and you can get images with a dominant color and so on. The important thing to mention, of course, though, is that when we talk about data in Earth observation, we're not talking about imagery, right? In any case, all these images are stacked with layers and layers of additional information, right? These are multispectral images. What we've curated here have already been processed, have already been color corrected. We've just brought those together, thematically organized them, and so on. We're not doing a lot of original processing ourselves. That's in other parts of our work. But there is also lots of non-visual data. We've got large amounts of numerical data we can make available. Again, it's public open data that we've curated. And through some of the other projects with collaborators in, there's even more beyond that. So tell us what you need and we'll find.